Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, a marketing exec, chief jargon buster, and I help ground AI in your practical day-to-day.
And I'm Kyle. I live at the intersection of data, product, and strategy, and I do my best to turn the technical AI chaos into something you can actually use.
We go beyond the overhyped headlines and give you the unvarnished truth about AI, what's real, what's hype, and what actually matters for your business.
Every week, we simplify the complex, spotlight the risks, and give you practical tools to make smarter decisions as the landscape rapidly shifts around us.
From agents to commerce to prompt engineering and vibe coding, we deliver honest insights, actionable strategies, and zero gatekeeping.
Let's dive in.
This is Early Adopter. Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. So, Jess, how's your week been?
It was a very busy work week this week. I had a lot of stuff going on. You know what I did today, which was so much fun. I'm so glad I did it. I've been meaning to do this for ages, but there was this TikTok that I stumbled across a couple of months ago from this girl who'd started a knitting club thing.
Okay.
Where people just go to a pub on a Monday evening and hang out and craft.
Amazing.
And I kind of know how to knit. I did it a couple years ago and then got out of the habit. But I'm so bad about being on screens. Even while I'm, if I'm watching TV, I'm working on my laptop or whatever. And so I'm trying to be better about being on screens. So I was like, fuck it. I want to remind myself how to knit so I can go do this knitting club. So I went to a knitting class today just to remind myself how to knit. And it was so much fun. I was only going to be there for an hour and I ended up being there for 2 hours because we were just knitting and chatting, knitting away. And I've signed up they're doing a movie screening and knitting thing where they'll have the lights.
Perfect
right?
For you.
Exactly. So I think it's early February. They're going to show a screening of When Harry Met Sally. And right, such a good movie. So I'm trying to do more things. So I thought that was just a really fun, silly little thing to do. And it was so much fun. So I had a very boring week this week, but that was the fun, nice thing that I did today. Anyway, how was your week?
Well, my week wasn't too crazy, but I am doing some stuff this weekend. I've got my friend's daughter's, Kaya, her first birthday party, which is super exciting.
Welcome to the world of children's birthday parties.
Yep. Well, yeah. We're in full swing of the children's birthday parties, so super excited about that. And I know this is more for maybe our American audience, but I'll keep the Brits aware of this, that we are in playoff football. So we've got some big games happening this weekend.
I do know that because I know the Seahawks have been doing very well.
Don't talk about the Seahawks. No, they are doing very well.
I don't want to jinx it, though, because I jinxed the Mariners, and I don't want to give my poor brother that heartache.
Yes.
I don't want to give my poor brother that heartache twice in a year.
My sister will be very happy if you jinx the Seahawks because she's a 49ers fan. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
it could be a tough family weekend next weekend if it's Rams versus 49ers. That's going to be tense.
Uh-oh.
But today, Jess, we are talking about the thing that I think makes everyone stop scrolling or maybe still scroll depending on your views. And I know we're going to provide a little bit of
for better or worse, for pros and cons.
Yeah, and I think we have slightly different perspectives on this.
So
this is going to be really interesting today.
We do, yes.
What we're talking about is AI video, content generation, image to video, text to video, all of it together. And specifically, I think how you can use it without turning your brand or your personal brand or your content into something that we've also covered, which is AI slop.
Yes, that's right. Because I think we're moving past the phase where it's impressive that they can do it, because I know when all of these things launched a couple of years ago, it was like, oh my God, look at the fact that you can even do this at all. Now the question is the quality good enough to actually be used for business? Is it just contributing to the whole AI slop epidemic that we are seeing anyway?
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you say that it's getting to a point where it's quite good. So can you do it in a way that feels credible and human, not that uncanny valley or, just things not looking weird? Because again, the output is getting good enough that it can help you, but it still is at a place where if you do it wrong, it can hurt you.
Yeah, because I think this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this episode in the first place, is that being in the marketing and advertising space, I see a lot of people using these tools. And I keep thinking, when is this actually useful? Or when is it just filler? When does it turn into slop? Because I've definitely seen both and have examples of both.
I've also seen people generate complete garbage, right? That wastes everyone's time. And you're like, why did you even put that out there? But at the same time, I've seen people use AI video in a way that saves probably a lot of time and does something pretty good. I've been testing. I took the break to test out a bunch of different stuff. And even in one session, I got both. And so again, we go back to our guiding principles around prompting and, iteration and all of those things that really can actually produce some good results.
Yeah, because I think you can be inundated by the number of, or overwhelmed is a better word, by the number of tools that are available. There are a lot. But again, as it always boils down to, it's not necessarily the tool, it's knowing what you're trying to do and having the skill to steer that tool. That's the key thing there. So we're going to be talking about that today.
Absolutely. We're going to anchor primarily around two names people keep speaking about, probably the more popular ones. OpenAI's Sora, which if you are scrolling social media these days, you actually see like a little Sora AI watermark. So it's a pretty popular one. But
also,
then
we did a whole episode about the Disney OpenAI partnership that is happening about Sora and with Sora. And we talked about that before Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. The OpenAI bit is Sora. I think we're also going to talk about Nano Banana, which is a big one that keeps popping up for video content people. And then we'll cover some other ones like VO and Runway and stuff like that. But we'll definitely anchor around those two big names.
Yeah, and just a quick note to flag that Nano Banana gets used in a couple of different ways online. For us, it represents a practical workflow, which is image first consistency and brand control, and then video generation on top.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're founder, marketer, consultant, business owner, basically, if you're part of our audience, this episode is what's real, what's usable, and how to not waste your time or go down a rabbit hole with this video content generation.
Exactly. And before we get started, just a little bit of quick housekeeping. As a reminder, you can find us on social at @early_adopter. Remember, there's no E in adopter. We're on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and LinkedIn. And if you want to email us directly, it's hello@earlyadopter.ai.
Yeah. And if you do get value from the podcast, please subscribe. And it would be great if you could leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. It really helps the show. It helps us get found by other people that are similar to you. So, Jess, let's untangle what works, when to use AI video, and when you should just do it the old-fashioned way. So I think let's start with Sora 2, since one, that's what I've tested the most, and I think is probably the more popular, somewhere between that and Nano Banana. It's OpenAI's text-to-video model. So you type in a description, it generates a video clip off the back of that. But what makes it really impressive is that the way it was trained on actual video and like real world models, it can understand the actual real world physics. I mean, we don't have to get too into that, but since it was trained on massive amounts of video data, it's actually learned how the real world like moves and interacts. So you're not seeing like crazy weird things happening with people. I mean, you can make people fly, but you're ultimately not like doing things that just don't make sense.
It's intentional.
You have to make it intentionally fly. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what is particularly interesting around Sora, is that the physics understanding is actually really critical from a content perspective, because the earlier AI video tools really had a problem where things would just float or morph in a weird way that was really uncanny valley and unnatural. So viewers could tell immediately if something was off, even if they couldn't quite tell you why. It's even if you look back on early days of CGI for film, you can tell when something's off. People recognize that. So that uncanny valley effect really kills engagement immediately because it creeps people out.
Yeah. So like what you're talking about with Sora 2, if you prompt a basketball shot that misses the hoop, the ball would actually bounce off the backboard realistically. It's not going to like glitch or stuff like that. Yeah. It obeys the laws of gravity. Objects have permanence. So the researchers that have described this jump from Sora 1, which you can still use today, and we're going to get into how you do that, but to Sora 2 is actually going from like GPT-1 to GPT 3.5, which remember GPT 3.5 was the well, GPT-3 was like the big kind of like launch and announcement that really got us all caring about AI and OpenAI. So it's a pretty massive leap.
The other thing that's really caught my attention about Sora 2 is the audio now. It's not just silent video anymore. So Sora 2 generates synchronized sound, dialogue, ambient noise, all the things that you would hear in the background of a real video anyway. So that's really massive for anyone creating content, because adding audio in post is a whole separate workflow. It's a whole separate expense. It's a whole separate skill set if you are doing that yourself. Like, it just adds a level of complexity to a video that, if it's being generated for you, that's great. Something else you don't need to worry about.
It's honestly pretty impressive. I was taken aback because when I started testing, I didn't really know about the audio component. And so I asked it to start generating things. And all of a sudden I got a video back and I just started talking. And I was like, where did that come from? That wasn't even in my original prompt, honestly. Someone described this to me. The original Sora was like a silent film generator. So it's like the Charlie Chaplin days,
it's
right?
Like this one right here. This was, well, it wasn't a silent film, but it was the second ever talking picture that Universal Pictures made. So
yeah, so Sora 2 is a moment where we went into talking picture days. And so we're moving beyond that silent era. And I think for specifications, if you're looking for clips that are somewhere like shorter clips, 4, 8, up to 12 seconds, pretty good resolution for the base model. Sora 2 is quite impressive. We'll get to that.
And 12 seconds sounds short, but from a social media perspective, that's actually, it's exactly what you want. So with like TikToks or Reels or YouTube Shorts, they're all optimized for that 6 to 15 second range. And you can string multiple clips together for longer content. We'll talk about what that looks like, or what that has the potential to look like later, I think. But the real question for me is consistency. Can you maintain that same character or product across multiple clips? Because that is really key. And that is one thing that AI isn't quite good at, even if you're just doing a still image.
Yeah, and I've been learning a lot more about social media and content generation these days, and dabbling in the CapCut of the worlds and all that fun stuff. And so Sora being able to produce those 4, even 12 seconds might be too long for what a lot of people do in the video generation space, but a 4-second piece and then clipping that all together is basically exactly what you do. So I think it's a big improvement. And also one more thing, Sora 2 can handle that multi-shot sequences with continuity. So that's a cool thing where you can write a mini storyboard in your prompt. So explain what shot 1 is. Maybe it's like a wide shot of a coffee shop. You can explain shot 2. It's like an actual making of an espresso. Shot 3 is et cetera, right? So you can really design and storyboard out what you want your video to be. And you can create clips that have consistent characters, consistent lighting and aesthetic. You can get very detailed if you really start to fine tune that prompt.
This is a really interesting one, because Sora can be really interesting from an advertisement perspective. Like, if you are making an ad, is that using it for something like this, where you've got one shot and then the next shot and then the next shot. It's a really nice use case for storyboarding. So if you want to storyboard out the visuals in action, and then you can go and shoot things properly, and you can tweak things and whatever when you're shooting it in real life. I actually think that this ability to string these multiple clips together from a scene perspective is a really nice use case of this is how you can get it to the final product. I think this is where I'm going to land. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is where I'm going to land, is that for me, these sorts of tools, I think, are great for giving you a starting point. And then that's where the artistic, the human element comes in and gives you the final product. But I think from a sketching it out, I think that's a really interesting use case.
Well, maybe we can make a larger point about this, which is I think maybe that's where a lot of tools are right now. And that's where people should level set around this. I mean, think about our vibe coding episode. It's what we were saying around that too.
Yeah,
great for prototyping, great for planning and testing and experimenting, getting a product person being able to get an idea off the ground, but probably not what you need or want for that full productionized version. Sounds like we're basically at the same place with Sora. So I think that's a good place for people to level set.
That's a great example. So if you want to go in and you're creative and you want to pitch something, I think for a lot of people, it's going to be easier to envision the final version if you are pitching something that is made for you without having to go to the expense of actually shooting something. So I like that prototype is the right word. You're creating the prototype with the AI, and then the final version is what is made by the humans. I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about this later, but I'll use it now. One of my friends who self-published his own book, great book, shout out to Nick Crawford. One of the things that I thought was so cool that he did is he used Sora to create like character videos from his book. And he used that in social media, not expecting it to be production worthy or like he's creating a full on movie, but it was a great use case to bring a visual component to his book launch and to talk about the characters in his book. So,
and
really cool use case.
That is cool. I think where my objections lie is taking away the jobs from the actual creatives, and whether that's advertising creatives. I know a lot of people who are copywriters and art directors, as well as all the amazing artists that are animators or whatever. That I think is where me, where I draw the line is use it for prototyping. Don't use it for the final version.
Yep. And I'll provide one other perspective on this, and this goes to our jobs bit. Imagine how good someone who really understands the detail of this, just like a software developer using Vibe coding. I think if you are a content creator or you're a videographer and animator, think about how much better the content is that you can make with these tools because you understand what makes sense and you understand aesthetic and lighting and storyboarding and all of that. So I almost feel like that group of people should actually be the ones using this the most, because what you can do is probably going to be a lot better than what I could do because I just won't understand it as much.
Let's now talk about Google's offering. Sorry, we got a little sidetracked on the actual usage of AI, but this is equally true both for Sora or for Nano Banana. So Google's offering is Nano Banana. It is an absolutely ridiculous name. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, don't let the silly name fool you. Yeah. Nano Banana Pro is actually Google's answer to some of the hardest problems in image generation. And it also plays a critical role in their video pipeline. So Nano Banana is technically an image model, not a video model, but Google pairs it with their VO model to create videos. So it is part of that foundational building block.
So it's quite different from Sora's model. It's a 2-model system, which is very different than Sora's all-in-one version.
Think of Nano Banana as creating like the keyframes and locking in the visual design, and then VO handles the animation, the motion, the audio, all of that. So I think the advantage of this approach is in those details. Nano Banana solved a problem that's plagued or was the issue with early image generators, which is legible text. I don't know if you remember this, but like
I remember complete gibberish.
Yeah, or just just spelling was all off. I mean, you could never get image to work.
Yeah, I mean, any marketer who's ever tried to use AI images for anything with text has run into that problem. It is complete gibberish. Product labels are completely unreadable. Like that defeats the purpose of it all. So if Nano Banana actually renders text correctly, then that's a whole category of content that wouldn't have been usable previously.
Google positions it as the best model for creating images with correctly rendered and legible text. So that's everything from logos, signs, product labels. Suppose it's all readable, and it goes up to 4K resolutions.
From a branding perspective, this is actually quite a big change. If you think about how much marketing content actually includes text, that's things like calls to action, product names, taglines, all of those things. If you can generate video where your brand name is on a product label that is actually readable, that's actually content that you can use externally rather than just from prototyping perspective.
Yeah, I remember in the early days, you try to produce something, you'd get the image, and then you would have to take it to Canva or Photoshop and actually do the text.
Exactly.
So the other big strength is character consistency. So again, Nano Banana can track facial features and different outfits in that 3D model. And so that makes sure that all the characters and everything stays the same, even as scene changes. Early days when you were working on a lot of this stuff, you couldn't get consistency across different images and scenes. It was just a nightmare to try to prompt that through. So that's really, I think, a big game changer too, that's changed.
So you could, for example, create a virtual spokesperson, and then you can use them across your entire video library with a consistent look, which is a really big thing. So that's essentially what major brands do with reoccurring actors and campaigns. So like Jake from State Farm is someone that is immediately recognizable, but without having to worry about the talent fees or scheduling or anything like that. If you're a smaller brand, like a lot of our audience would be, you probably don't have the money for a consistent actor.
Or potentially just if you want to like maximize yourself, if it's your personal brand, you can upload your character and then use yourself to do all sorts of fun stuff.
I probably wouldn't do that, but you could technically.
Yeah. And then lastly, it's just worth noting with VO3, which handles the video synthesis side for Google, it also generates synchronized audio like Sora. So, you have a lot of comparable, or parity between the two systems.
So let's get into the practical, because that is what we always love to do. So what can our audience of startups and small businesses actually do with these tools? So let's look at some actual use cases and break down why they actually matter.
Yeah, I'm going to start with my headshot experiment.
Okay.
And I think this is actually interesting for every professional. I mean, I thought it was cool at least. But also I think it illustrates the image to video capability really well. So what I did is I took my LinkedIn headshot, which was just a single photo, and I uploaded it and I was using Sora too. I uploaded it as a starting frame and then prompted it to say, provide me with a video where it looks like I'm sitting down for the shot. I also did a couple versions where I just was like focused on the frame, but I just wanted to be moving to give like a little bit of activity. Because I saw on this cool deck, like on the team section, it was actually like a video of everyone's headshot. So it just gave a little bit more character.
Okay. Yeah. A little more life.
Anyway, yeah, life was good. So, but what came out of it looks like the video from the actual photo session. So it looks like I'm walking into the frame, sitting down and smiling and acting quite natural. So it has slight shifts. It's me adjusting on the seat. It's like very nuanced to make it look very real.
Sorry. But I think the application there is really obvious. So obviously you could do a video intro for a website, pitch decks like you just talked about, that's personal branding that would perhaps normally require a video shoot, but you can also extend that concept to products as well. So a static product photo can become a more dynamic showcase. It's the difference from I remember the days of when someone would be selling something on Etsy and they would just have a photo, like let's say you were buying a photograph, like an art photograph on Etsy. It used to be that you would just have the square of the photo, and then people started putting the image into a template of a picture frame so you could see what that image looked like as a frame. This is the next iteration of that coming from a video perspective. So it's that natural evolution so that you're putting it in a context that people understand. It helps them understand things better.
Absolutely. I think Shopify has been doing this for a while too, where let's say you're selling some sort of product, you can put your product into some of their like templates. So it could look like a person is holding or wearing your t-shirt or your sweatshirt or holding something. This now takes it to a whole new level where you're actually like, you have people interacting with the product. So it looks like a proper product shoot. I think that's from a buying perspective, a carousel of static image becoming a video showing the product from different angles and people working with it with motion and context is a lot more, aesthetically pleasing.
People have no imagination. You have to give it's the same concept as staging a house, right? You have to give people, this is how you can use this product. This just helps them along that line. So like from a marketing perspective, if I put my marketing hat on, some examples, we've talked about product demos before you have a product, which is actually a really useful one. If you just have designs, this could really help with that. This is really big for a hardware startup, for example, or if you've got a physical product of any sort, you can generate realistic videos of what that product will look like before you've even finished the prototype. So same for software, actually. You can do a concept video of what your UI would look like in action before it's built. So there's quite a lot of use cases within marketing for this. And I'm actually fine with this sort of use case because I don't necessarily think that this takes away from a human element, because actually this is just, helping a small business. Yeah, exactly.
And, a lot of great use cases like investor presentations, early customer validation. Let's say you wanted to show a software UI and then put a wait list up against it, definitely good enough for that.
Another use case is social media content at scale, because the
Mhm.
economics of video content can be challenging, especially for smaller businesses. Now you can generate multiple variations to A/B test. And I think this is very interesting, because what you can do
Mhm.
is A/B test something, see which one performs better, and then you can put your effort into the version that wins on that A/B test. That is very
Mhm.
interesting. And I think that really makes that is a valuable use case.
Yeah, the Sora app itself. So Sora 2 is primarily mobile. So you download the Sora app. It has TikTok style features built into it. So
Well,
you
yeah,
can
because they
browse.
wanted to have they're building their own social media network. Yeah.
Exactly. And when I first loaded it up and turned it on, I was like, what is this? I felt very old. I was just like, what's happening? I just wanted to start, like, I was expecting chat interface to start generating
Yeah.
content. But it's social features. You can
Yeah.
browse AI generated videos. You can remix and share them, which is obviously part of the virality of TikTok. They're explicitly building Sora for that social content creation workflow. It's not just a tool where I ask it to do something and I get an output. They are trying to build a platform.
Another interesting use case is explainer and educational content, which is obviously big for a SaaS
Mhm.
platform or a B2B company. Like and I think about back in the day when you and I worked at Real D, and I helped create a video about how 3D works, having it and it cost an absolute fortune to do that video. That would have actually been so useful to have back in the day for that sort of thing. So you can create these videos with consistent, like as we talked about earlier, a consistent AI spokesperson. So I think that actually is a
Mhm.
very interesting use case, especially for a startup where you might not have a ton of money to put into something like an explainer video.
And the consistency across videos is the
Yeah.
key here. With Nano Banana's facial consistency, if you do build a spokesperson, they're going to look identical in every video you create.
This is another great use case that you just referenced, pitch deck videos.
Mhm.
Most pitch decks are still static slides. So imagine the impact of having a short video clip that can bring your vision to life. Again, you have to inspire people, especially if it's in a pitch deck.
Yeah.
And I think a video is much more inspiring than just a static slide. You can do voiceover, all of that good stuff. So you can really show
Mhm.
an investor what your product looks like in the real world with real movement and context. And most startups are not going to have that sort of money to throw into a pitch deck.
Yeah, I haven't seen it too much yet, but I've seen a few use cases here and there, and it's growing. So
Yeah.
I think visual storytelling in pitches can be a real differentiator.
It's definitely more memorable right now, for sure.
Way more memorable.
Yeah.
Even
Sort of crowded marketplace, whatever helps you stand out.
but I think right now, especially, it demonstrates that you understand how to leverage emerging technology. So many companies talk about being AI
Mm.
native or AI first. Well, are you using it in every aspect of what you're doing? And pitching is a huge part of it. So
Yeah.
it's a great way to illustrate that.
So the final use case that we are looking at today is the Cameo feature in Sora 2.
Yeah. So after a one-time setup where you record a short verification video to prove your identity and capture your appearance, because again, they are trying to put guardrails around using real characters. So you'll see that if you download Sora or Nano Banana and you upload a real picture, it will stop you unless you verify that it's properly you. But once you do verify your identity and capture your appearance, Sora can then insert a digital version of you into any generated scene. So a founder or business owner, you could literally be the presenter in your product demo video without ever having to film anything new. So it's you in the video, your voice, your face, but it's all AI generated. So it can just scale what you want to do.
This is, like, from a technical perspective, this is obviously amazing. This definitely raises some red flags around ethics,
100%.
which we will talk about in a little bit. But from a pure, like, technical or capability standpoint, it removes the founder as a bottleneck in content creation, which actually, if you've ever tried to get founders to do anything, it's a nightmare. I spent hours. I once hired a podcast studio so I could sit my founders down for 3 hours and just record back to back to back to back video clips with
I
them.
remember that.
Oh my God, don't even get me started on that. That was really difficult. But it was actually quite expensive and time consuming to do that. So this is, if you've ever had to deal with that sort of thing, it does remove a bottleneck for sure.
So now we want to talk about best practices, how to get the really good results. Because having access to these tools is one thing, but as we've discussed, you can also still get bad output from this. Getting good results requires understanding how to work with them. So again, as we always talk about in our ethos, the quality of your output depends heavily on how you prompt.
Yeah, I mean, this is prompt engineering for video. The general concept is exactly the same. And from working with a lot of people who do content, I can tell you that the people who treat the AI tools like magic, make me something cool, they're never going to get what they want. They're always going to be disappointed with it. So the people that approach it like directing a shoot, like you said, if you come from a background of being an animator or being whatever, you're going to get far better results because you actually know how to do things like look at the lighting that comes from the top of the screen to the right, whatever.
That's a great mental model. So think of yourself as the director and cinematographer, but just in text form. So you need to write shot lists and camera directions. First principle, describe scenes like a movie storyboard. Don't just say a woman in an office, say medium shot of a woman in a modern office typing on a laptop, afternoon sunlight coming through the window, and then the phone starts ringing on her desk. There's so much more like detail and context and understanding that you can utilize in that.
Yeah, you're giving them the shot type, the action, the lighting, the atmosphere, all in one prompt. So that level of detail will make a really, really big difference. And the good news is you don't need a film degree. You can use natural language. You can just talk through what you would say naturally. So camera follows the person as they walk works, even though you might not know the official term, which is it's a tracking shot.
Though if you want specific looks, and I think learning a few key terms helps a lot. So these models do understand film terminology, close up, wide shot, pan, zoom, use those terms and they will dramatically improve your output.
And from a marketing perspective, I would also make sure that you think about the emotional tone that you want. So warm and inviting versus sleek and professional versus energetic and dynamic. I use the term personable and conversational when I'm prompting a lot because that's the tone that I want. So all of them will produce different results. And the AI does really pick up on the descriptors and it really does make a big difference.
Yeah, the second principle that you can use is use multiple shots for complex sequences. So this is where we talked about chaining different sequences together. So if you want like a mini story or different angles, break your prompt up into labeled sections. So tell it what the first shot is, tell it what the second shot you want it to be, et cetera, et cetera. The model will interpret that and stitch shots together with natural transitions.
And this is how professional video content is made anyway. So you have the establishing shot, you've then got the, detailed shot of zooming in on someone's hands while they make a coffee or whatever it is. So the AI is learning from professionally edited content, so it understands those sorts of conventions. So if you work with them rather than against them, it will give you better results.
Yeah, another principle that can really help is providing reference images when you have a specific look in mind. So this is, again, going back to the pattern recognition. It's really good with this. And this is what made my headshot experiment work. I gave it the headshot that I wanted. So if you have a particular character design or a product shot or a brand aesthetic, upload it as your starting frame and the model can use that as a reference and then just build motion on top of it.
From a brand consistency perspective, this is absolutely essential. So you create your product image or your logo, you get it looking exactly right, and then you have the AI animate it because your brand visuals will stay on point because you've locked them in from the start. You've given it that this is the thing that you need to use. So you control the creative and then the AI handles the motion video side of things.
Yep. And this next principle really just goes back to prompting in general, right? So you need to balance the detail. So if your prompt is too short or generic, the AI is going to fill in the gaps with its own creativity, which is unlikely to match your vision. If it's too long and micromanaging, you might confuse the model and get really rigid results. So you want the sweet spot is to be iterative, like we always talk about. So start medium detailed, see what you get, and then refine from there.
This matches how any creative process works. You don't write final copy on the first draft. You don't nail a design in the first iteration. If you've ever worked with the designer, they give you one version and then you tweak it and then you get the next version. So if you treat AI video as a conversation rather than the one-shot request, that will set the right expectations and you'll get a much better output. So the next principle is for Nano Banana specifically, which is that you need to explicitly prompt for readable text if you need it. So that is really important if you want that actually usable, like external facing piece of content. So you would need to say something like product label shows company name XYZ clearly visible. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, that is a really unique strength of Nano Banana. So you need to make sure that it is explicitly stated when you are generating content with that product.
Yep. If you're trying to produce longer content, you need to actually break that into chunks and think more modular. So if you are trying to do like minute-long or 2-minute-long videos, you should generate 10 to 12-second scenes separately. And then edit together in a separate video software. So, and then you can use the last frame to first frame technique where the ending of one clip becomes the starting reference for the next one. This is obviously very popular in social media content. And that can maintain better continuity across segments. But the ultimate thing is don't try to produce minute or 2-minute long segments with this. Break it up into chunks and then edit it together.
I mean, I think that this probably isn't going to be super unfamiliar for anyone who's ever made any form of video or knows anything about filmmaking or TV. You don't film an entire scene, you film it in shots that get stitched together. So it's very similar to standard, unless you're the studio and you do an entire episode that is a one-track shot, which is phenomenal, but very, very difficult.
I was thinking of the Birdman.
Oh, or
Birdman.
Yeah, that's the other one, Birdman. But exactly.
But to that point, that's a very unique stylistic choice. Even not common.
Even in filmmaking, that is a stylistic choice. You still treat the AI generated content like you would any other type of video content. You're stitching the scenes together, but the AI just handles like the actual content generation part of it.
And now last principle that I think you should follow is, respect
very important one.
This one's very important, right? And we'll get into more downsides and risks here in a second, but respect the content guidelines. So these tools do have safety filters. They will refuse violence, sexual content, deepfakes of public figures without permission, or really just any like real character. They will try to stop you with that. If you hit a filter unexpectedly, rephrase your prompt and really do stick with that. Sometimes, you're not trying to do something. You can have like an innocuous request and it will trigger a false positive. Just change your prompt and adhere to some of the guidelines that it provides.
You'll hit a filter with copyrighted content as well. Like, all I want is to make a little Godzilla video, but I can't generate a Godzilla video because he is copyrighted.
Just why are you trying to make a Godzilla video?
There was a reason. I was trying to do something last year with Godzilla and I can't remember why, but
that's so
I love
awesome.
Godzilla. Do you not know that I have 2 Godzilla prints on my wall right now.
I did not know this, Jess.
I haven't. Godzilla is
so much.
I love Godzilla so much. I love him and all of his Godzilla pals. Highly recommend the like 60s, 70s, 80s Godzilla movies. They're my favorite. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of the possibilities with these tools. Now let's get into the limitations and the things to be aware of, the risks and the downsides, because there are risks and downsides to this as well. I think before you go into using these video generation tools with unrealistic expectations, you're gonna waste your time and your money. What are the actual constraints here?
Yeah, we've already talked about this one, the clip length. So Sora 2 caps at 10 to 12 seconds. Veo is around 8 to 10. Just be aware of it. It does add a little time and complexity. If you try to cram too much action into one single clip, the model isn't going to handle that properly. So sequences can get truncated or cut off abruptly. So keep each shot focused on one main action or prompt and don't try to fit like a whole story into 10 seconds.
Consistency is another area where you need to set realistic expectations. These models are much better than earlier generations, but if you push them with complex scenes or a lot of characters or intricate details, you're definitely going to see a drift. So characters' outfit color might change slightly. So those are all just things that you need to be aware of.
The models are quite good at bigger picture based on how they've been trained, but they can fumble really fine details. So for most marketing content, viewers won't notice this, but if you're doing something where precise consistency matters, you're going to have to do some editing, or maybe it's not the right use case. So again, this is where we talk about this is great for prototyping, not great for probably producing a feature-length film.
Also, I will just flag that AI artifacts, so those weird glitches that really scream this is AI generated, those can definitely still happen. Don't expect that's magically disappeared, because it definitely does still happen. Okay, so let's move on to the elephant in the room around this, which is deepfakes and misuse. Obviously, this technology has potential for harm. How is everyone handling this?
Yeah, both OpenAI and Google, the parent companies of Sora and Nano Banana that we've been talking about, they've built guardrails in. So they refuse to generate realistic videos of public figures without consent. Sora's Cameo feature that we talked about requires identity verification. So you can only insert yourself, not others. And then they block explicit violence and sexual content. They're not perfect, and we talked about with Rich, they degrade over time, but they are meaningful initial barriers.
And obviously copyrighted content, which we just talked about. There is also movement towards watermarking, which is very interesting. So Google's got something called Synth ID, which embeds invisible watermarks in AI-generated content. I believe that TikTok has started doing this as well as part of their crackdown on AI-generated content. So again, it's not a complete solution, but it does add a layer of accountability.
Yeah, and for businesses using these tools legitimately, I think our recommendation is simple. Be really transparent. So most content online that you see that is produced with Sora adds the Sora watermark. Let your audience know when content is AI generated, especially if it contains, human portrayals. This heads off potential backlash.
And actually, if you have ever uploaded content to Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever, there is a switch that you have to flip to show that this is AI generated content. So that's worth mentioning as well, is that you have to, but especially coming at this from a business perspective in particular, you have to let your people know, like you have to let your audiences know. It's basically false advertising otherwise.
On copyright and legal, both OpenAI and Google allow commercial use of generated videos. So those models claim no copyright on outputs, and they do assign usage rights to you as long as you follow their policies. So the broader IP questions around AI training data are still being litigated, but for practical purposes, the content that you generate with these models is yours to use wherever you want.
Yeah, if you want to know more about that, look at the Getty Images Stability AI lawsuit that happened towards the end of last year, where they ruled in favor of Stability AI. So that was a very big thing. But anyway, we could talk about the legality of that all day long. We're not, because that's another hour-long podcast. One other limitation to be aware of is bias. This is a really big one. This is something that you may have noticed yourself if you even just generated a still image. These models can reflect biases from their training data. So if you prompt a doctor talking to a patient without specifics, you are probably going to see demographic patterns that don't necessarily reflect the diversity that you want in your content. It will almost always be a man, just flagging that there. So the responsibility is on the user, or sorry, not even just a man, a white man. So the responsibility is on the user to guide the model towards more inclusive representations, shall we say.
Yeah, so be very specific in your prompts if diversity matters. And it should matter, both ethically and because diverse content performs better with diverse audiences.
So talking about elephants in the room, because obviously I am more skeptical about this than you are on acceptability and how much the general public still has accepted AI generated content. I'm still a little bit cautious. I still don't know if audiences and stakeholders, well, I would say stakeholders are fine with it. It's whether or not audiences are okay with this, with AI generated content. I think the answer is sometimes it's acceptable, but it really depends on the context, the transparency, how it's used, how well it's used. We covered the McDonald's ad from before Christmas from the Netherlands. We talked about that. It was so bad it got pulled because there was a lot of backlash against it. That being said, the Coke ad performed relatively well and people didn't seem to mind it as much. So that could be, European audiences are a little bit more skeptical about this sort of stuff than American audiences anyway. But I think it is also in how well it's done and whether it's transparent. I think what Rich talked about last week about how AI is being used in certain post-production workflows.
Yep.
I think that's totally fine. As he said, and he is speaking as a post-production professional who is talking to people in these industries all the time. to, make some of that work easier, that's totally fine. And I don't think your average person is going to care about that.
No.
It's when it is so obviously generated and generated badly, like the McDonald's ads, that is really where you start to get the pushback from audiences.
Yeah. I'm a little more bullish there.
Yeah.
I think audience acceptance is definitely growing, especially on social platforms. I would say people enjoy novel AI content, or at least it's eye-catching in some ways.
Over on my side of the internet, it is very much the opposite. People fucking hate it.
Well,
absolutely hate it. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I've recently been introduced to cappuccino, ballerina, and all of those crazy wild things, which I wouldn't necessarily as good AI content, but I will say it is engaging. And so there is maybe a corner of the internet which, viewers don't mind or are intrigued that AI was involved. That's probably a unique use case, but I definitely see a lot more AI content being generated that I think people are accepting. I just don't know the staying power of it. I think
I think the novelty will wear off. I think that in the next year or so, we're going to start seeing, there's all sorts of conversations about content creators. You're going to see a return to the authenticity that I think is lacking in some of these things. People are going to want that human-to-human connection. But I think what TikTok did around allowing you to control how much AI-generated content on your feed is the way to go. Because that way, if I don't want any AI-generated content on my feed, I can decide that. You can have more than me because clearly it doesn't annoy you as much as it annoys me. So I think giving people the ability to control it, I think is important. But I also think that that novelty can wear off really quickly the moment that people feel like they were misled, or that there's a brand trying to pass AI content off as something it's not. The second that you destroy that trust, people really hate that. That is the kiss of death. That you have to be transparent in these sorts of situations.
Yeah, being upfront is the difference between this is cool and I'll check it out, that novelty, and this feels deceptive or you're lying to me. You need to disclose it or frame it properly. And then if you do it that way, I think you can get away with using AI content. But when you hide it or when you try to pass something off, that potentially has brand reputational issues.
Yeah. I think for a lot of the business use cases that we've talked about today, so something like an explainer video or prototyping, some product shots, the pitch deck, I think that's an acceptable territory, but I'd still be a little selective. Don't use AI video to imply things that didn't happen or to fabricate credibility. That's going to get you into false advertising territory anyway, which is going to be a little dodgy, and you potentially could get burned quite badly with that. So from a practical perspective, that is also where I push back a little bit, because this is something that we saw with the McDonald's ad. Again, it took, I think it was 10 people and hours and hours and hours and hours of work to generate this shitty ad that got pulled anyway. And a lot of the pushback on that was, well, why didn't you just do it in the normal way to begin with? Was it worth that time and effort? Yeah. Arguably no in that particular instance. So that is also just something to bear in mind, is that from a cost perspective, I get it. In that instance, it probably wasn't any cheaper just filming it normally. But for a small business or for a founder, it is more practical. So I do think that it's okay. But just think about the actual practicality of it. Is it worth the time and effort?
Yeah.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah, speed can be a really big win here. Your ability to iterate and prototype very quickly can be really great unlock. But I think, as we talked about, if you're trying to do something that's really production level, you're not going to get around some of the more traditional production. That storyboarding concept, I think, is a great one. So think about just level setting of where these tools are and where you should be using them, I think, is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I would agree with that, the tools don't or shouldn't replace creative thinking or taste, but I think they lower the barrier to experimentation, or they lower the barrier to entry in a meaningful way for certain people. So I think that is acceptable.
Yeah. So I'll say from my side, AI video tools are quite good. They can be acceptable in the right situations. And I think they're practical enough for most business applications right now. They're not perfect, but there is some real value proposition. And the gap between imagining a video and actually having one is shrinking quite quickly.
Yeah. And from my more skeptical perspective, they are powerful tools. they reward intention and restraint. So use thoughtfully, they can be helpful. Use carelessly, they can cause an absolute shitstorm. So I think that's just the balance that you need to think about as a founder if you're using them.
We are going to switch over to our AI news of the week. A lot is happening, and we even didn't, I think, cover everything that came up.
We didn't, because there's one story that I just want to flag that we are aware of, but we don't need to get into it too much because we've talked about already. And that is that ChatGPT has officially announced that they are launching ads in the platform. That will not surprise anyone because
we knew it was coming.
We knew it was coming. It's been coming for months, so it's not a surprise. That's why I didn't add it in as one of the news stories, but we just wanted to flag that we are well aware of that happening.
But for today, this is a really interesting one. So our first story is Microsoft has made a formal 5-point commitment to communities hosting their data centers. So they've been transparent about the electricity costs, the water replenishment, not asking for tax breaks, local nonprofit investment. So they
are offering apprenticeships to people in the local community as well.
Yes, absolutely. So what I'm trying to understand is why they announced this now.
Data centers are becoming a real talking point, a real hot button issue, especially at the local level, because they can affect local communities so much. The IEA says electricity demand from data centers is going to triple by 2035. So communities are watching their power bills spike, and they're really pushing back. And so there's different things being put forward in different regions. There's already a number of data centers that have been squashed by local communities because they affect these local communities so much. So Microsoft is getting ahead of this before it shuts down their entire expansion. And I think they're doing it, I mean, as much as Microsoft can be doing it in a smart way, they're doing it in a way that is addressing some major concerns that these communities have.
Yeah, they're being strategic. They're trying to use it as a competitive edge, really.
They are. But I'm not going to knock them for it, because at least they're doing something.
Yeah. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're trying to get in front of it so that when, Google or Amazon wants to build this data center, communities might say, well, actually, Microsoft has committed to, responsible AI infrastructure. Therefore, we choose, that option rather than the other one.
Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely, it's greenwashing, the whole thing, because they are still, they still have a lot of negatives. But I think if enough communities start to demand this, or if the states actually start to demand this, or the local governments start to demand it, then suddenly it just becomes a baseline for the entire industry. So it's not a bad thing. At least Microsoft are trying to set a standard. So it's a good shift in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it is going to overall improve like the floor for what everyone is doing here. So that is good. I think one of the challenges whether this is going to cause, because the margins are so high, if this is going to cause some of these providers to build in less regulated regions where they can cut corners. So I think we do need some smart regulation around this so that, players are being fair in the market.
It could just be lip service. But honestly, it's an attempt, which is better than what the others are doing. Obviously, the environmental concerns of AI are enormous. So it's going to increasingly become a bigger issue. So it is important for it to be addressed.
Yep. Okay. Our second story is, I think, really big news.
Yeah.
So Apple just announced they're building their foundational models on top of Google's Gemini.
Yeah.
Which is wild because Apple has always been, their ethos has always been, we do everything ourselves. We build internally. Vertical integration is our advantage, right? Like the Steve Jobs mantra of like closed system. So this is very different from that. They're saying actually building frontier models and doing it ourselves is so expensive and complex that we're not going to do it from scratch, and we're going to basically buy, not build.
And this is really interesting because it means that Apple would have looked at everyone, and Google won. This is another interesting development, I think, and we mentioned it last week, where this time last year, Google was a laughingstock of the AI world, and now it is being chosen by Apple. But I also think it does say something about how expensive building an LLM is. Again, this is actually something that we talked about with Rich on the Bubble episode, but Google is now the default intelligence layer inside of Apple's operating system, which is cannot be overstated what a big deal that is for Apple.
And so absolutely. So I think the model game or providers is consolidating.
Yeah.
Basically, I have Google, OpenAI, and I would say Anthropic as well. But, if you're someone building AI products, you're probably building on top of someone else's foundation, and that's consistent across the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, there is also going to be a regulatory angle to this.
Hmm.
There are potentially going to be some regulatory hurdles involved with this, but it is just an absolutely enormous, enormous deal for both Google and for Apple. Okay, our final story of the week. Again, this has been a very, very busy week for AI announcements. Everyone's come back from CES and just gone a little bit crazy.
Yep.
So Anthropic has launched a new product called Cowork. This is basically agents that work in your own file system instead of just chatting with you. This is like their non-technical version of Claude Code, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, and what a great thing to do, because Claude Code, obviously, I sing its praises. I think it does a really good job of breaking down tasks. So what this Cowork can do is you can assign it a task, like organize my files or extract data from a spreadsheet, and it goes and does it. No asking permission on every step. You grant it access to the folder, set the task, and it handles the workflow. So again, going back to our ladder of autonomy, we are moving up that ladder quite quickly. Okay, Jess, a lot of news there, but let's switch over to our AI gone wrong this week. It's funny. It's a little depressing.
It is.
Yep. So we'll see how everyone feels about it. But last year, the National Weather Service got gutted by, let's just say, some not so forward-thinking folks. I won't pass judgment, but
I will.
Yeah, I love that. And so they fired about 550 people. They promised to rehire most of them last summer, but unsurprisingly, months later, the agency is still massively understaffed. They haven't hired those roles back, and a lot of those positions are still unfilled.
So if you fast forward to last week, a local NWS office in Idaho is trying to post a routine weather forecast. So it's not anything particularly crazy. It's just a map showing some windy conditions.
Except the map they generated, this is our AI gone wrong.
Yep.
The map they generated had completely fabricated town names on it. One of my favorites was Orangetild and Watermarks. And these aren't like typos, right?
No.
These are fully hallucinated places that do not exist in Idaho, and I'm going to guess don't exist anywhere.
No, I'm going to think that's correct. And the worst part about all of this is that the Washington Post had to call NWS to tell them about this. So the agency didn't catch their own mistake. The Washington Post reached out and said, hey, these are not real towns, right? And only then did NWS take it down.
Yeah, it's super embarrassing on its own, right? To get called out by someone else. But I think what made this part of a larger pattern. So Rapid City, South Dakota, they basically did the same thing in November where they posted a map with illegible location names. So it's definitely happening more than once, and I think points to like a systemic or structural issue within the National Weather Service.
They are so understaffed that someone thought, we can use AI to speed this up. It can generate the base map and then fill in the actual forecast data, ship it, and that's faster than doing it manually. And that's, as always, where it goes terribly wrong.
The problem is the map looks professional, right? It has all the right cartographic elements. So like a really quick scan of it, it's probably going to look okay, but nobody's stopping to verify the places are actually real. So you're missing like a very crucial step.
So I think this just really answers to this institutional momentum towards using AI faster with less oversight, especially at this moment in time, which creates exactly the conditions for this mistake. There's a lot of pressure to move fast. Staff who are already overworked, unclear policy about when it's appropriate to use AI, policy, back to a very important thing that we often talk about. And that is when you get fake towns in Idaho.
And this goes back to our image generation in this episode in general, right? This is a real world example about why it really matters to have a human involved in the process, to not just produce more AI slop. It's just human in the loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's land with some takeaways, something that we think we can do. So AI video generation has crossed, I think, from interesting experiment to genuinely useful or potentially useful business tool, depending on you or me, Jess.
These tools democratize video production. So what used to require expensive equipment and teams is now accessible to anyone with good prompting skills and a modest budget.
Think of prompting as directing. The more guidance that you can give it, especially with some of those like cinematic descriptions, the better your results are going to be.
Use reference images to lock in your visual style.
Yep. And lastly, be transparent about your AI use. It's definitely can be a marketing differentiator, or it can be really damaging to your brand if you're trying to get something across people and they notice any uncanny valley.
So the bottom line on AI video generation is that, as we always say, AI isn't magic. It's a tool. And like any tool, if you don't know how to use it, you are just going to make a mess.
But when you do know how to use it, it can help you prototype quickly, potentially save some time, and get something to market quickly.
And the biggest takeaway here is that your voice, your perspective, your judgment, that is, as always, the irreplaceable part. AI can speed up the mechanical work, but you still have to be the editor, the strategist, the one who says, yes, this is the thing that is worth publishing, so you don't end up in a situation where you have fake towns on a map.
You're not replacing your creative thinking. You're not replacing your specific perspective and narrative. You're replacing some of the grunt work or speeding up your time to produce some of this early stage content. And that's a really big difference.
Yeah. So if you are experimenting with content or with video generation tools, if you've found something that works for you, or honestly, if you've completely failed and you want to let people know about your failures, we want to hear about it. Email us at hello@earlyadopter.ai.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about my first iteration on Sora was on my headshot thing is I came flying in from the ceiling. So
oh my God, please send me that video so we can post it on socials.
There's some great use cases here, but yeah, so hit us up on social. We're at @early_adopter on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, all that fun stuff. And remember, no E in the adopters.
Thank you for listening to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage. We will see you next week.
See you next week, Jess.
Bye.